All right, so today I want to talk about this tweet from Peter Schiff, who's a very good follow if you don't follow him already. And he says, employers don't determine wages, productivity does. Employers enhance worker productivity by providing them with capital, which allows higher wages to be paid. Employers can't underpay workers or they'll quit. A minimum wage that attempts to require them to do that over destroys jobs. So um, that's pretty much, I mean, a very good way of putting it. In that, and this is one of the many problems with the left. And it's not that they're 100% wrong; they just seems like they have the economic knowledge of a 5-year-old, and that's the problem when you get in these debates and discussions. Is that they think that wages are just blindly determined. That the only reason that a doctor gets paid more than someone who flips burgers is just some random guy just saying, yeah, I think this guy should get paid more. They don't understand the fact that a doctor provides um, probably hundreds of times more value to the average person than someone who flips burgers. And that is what wages are determined by. And this is the thing too, is that the only way that the leftist idea can, people will try to debate that, but the only way that the leftist idea can make sense is if wages are just blindly determined, that some random, it's just random, that, oh well, that there's no rhyme or reason behind it. But reality is that there is. The reality is that there is. The reason why a celebrity can make tens of millions of dollars a year is because millions of people want to go watch their movies or listen to their music or whatever. Um, and the reason why the local garage band doesn't make hardly makes next to no money is because only a handful of people want to watch them. It has nothing to do with any of this stupid garbage that the left brings up all the time. So um, and he says employers enhance worker productivity by providing them with capital, which allows higher wages to be paid. Employees can't underpay workers or they'll quit. A minimum wage that attempts to require them to overpay destroys jobs. Now, again, the last point is something that's very, very important and something that people just conveniently leave out. And another way too, that the only way that the leftist argument makes sense too, is that why not make the minimum wage even higher than it already is? I mean, $15 an hour is it's not enough to get by and pretty well everywhere. Why not 20? Why not 25? Why not 50? Why not 100? And the reality is that they would, when you make that argument, which it is a realistic argument, it would force them to admit that artificially having the minimum wage at some artificial amount doesn't work. It doesn't work because the problem is that if you make it too high, it prices a lot of people out of the labor pool. Because if you can't, let's just say the minimum wage is $15 an hour, and you can't provide $15 an hour, I mean, plus a little more so that the business can make money, then no one's going to want to hire you because they would be losing money to hire you. It's just, and this is the other thing too, that you just know that most of these people have never run businesses. Now, I've never run a business, but at the very least, I've studied business. I've taken business in school, at least, and not to mention I have multiple family members that are business owners. So I kind of know at least somewhat what I'm talking about. In that, like I say, wages aren't just artificially decided, like just no rhyme or reason behind it. That's not how it works. And again, this is the problem with the leftist position, is that they again, they have this false guise of, oh, we care about the poor, therefore whatever thing we point out, um, it must make it okay. But that's the equivalent of being like, we should just print $1 million and give it to every poor person. Like, that's the same argument as saying we should have the minimum wage at X, because that wouldn't work. All that would happen is, like, okay, let's just say, giving everybody $1 million, or giving every poor person $1 million, it would inflate the money supply by, well, let's just say a random number, 100%. Well, guess what? The prices of goods and services and the prices of everything would just go up in perpetuity to match that. So it wouldn't do anything. And that's the problem with this whole minimum. One of the other many problems with this whole minimum wage garbage is that all businesses do is just raise their prices. And guess what happens when they raise their prices? You pay more. So someone making $15 an hour, guess what? They're in a lot of ways they're not even better off for when they started, because they're paying more for their food and their groceries and their gas and for everything, because um, the grocery store has to pay the high school kid who's just wanting to make money to save for college. He's got to pay him $15 an hour when he may only be worth 10. Now, there shouldn't be any laws, I would say that, but there should be something that society agrees on that says, hey, this is the line where we're going to draw. We're not going to tolerate anything different. And this is the other thing too, is that the left in general believes that the average individual has no intelligence, no self-respect whatsoever, because the only way their argument makes sense is if the average person literally would be fully on board and fully willing to literally work for next to nothing. But the reality is that's not true. The reality is that let's just say some employer was paying someone like $1 an hour. Well, what would happen is that, I mean, the person should quit. I mean, especially once they have experience, they could quit and go work somewhere else. Or number two, the general public would catch wind of that and they would stop shopping at whatever place it is. And the leftist argument only makes sense is if the overwhelming majority of people are too big of a-holes to do that. So again, the leftist argument on one side is, oh, compassion and we're doing the right thing, and on the other hand, it's everybody is too much of an a-hole and too selfish to do what's right. So we're just going to force everyone to, like, again, which one is it? It's the classic: are people good or are people bad? And the reality is that people respond to incentive. But the problem is that the left wants to simultaneously argue from the people are naturally good position and from the people are naturally bad position. You have to pick one. You have to pick one. Um, the reality is that people respond to incentive too. I believe that if a business was abusing workers, that the majority of people, or at the very least enough people, would stop shopping there, that they would go out of business. I genuinely, and the other problem too is that a lot of people just flat out aren't aware of it, and that's one of the other problems. But the main point being here is that um, wages aren't just artificially determined, and the problem is that when you do artificially um, determine wages, people just raise their prices. Like, people would just raise their prices, and what happens then, that too, is that it destroys jobs too. Entry level jobs are going to be harder for people to find because it an entry level job is, and not to mention too, um, the minimum wage is another way to cover up for the fact that public schools do a terrible job of educating people, and I mean terrible. And the reason is that you have 12 years of education, and you have a lot of people who aren't even capable of earning $15 an hour from that 12 years of education. Like, that says by default there is no debate on the topic that um, public schools do a bad job on average, because if you have 12 years of education, there is no reason that you should not be able to get a job for 15 or probably even 20 or $25 an hour coming out of school. There was no reason. If public schools were actually doing a good job, the reality is that they don't do a good job. They don't do it. They Public schools exist largely to pretend to educate people and to brainwash people. That is why public schools exist largely. So that is the other aspect too that nobody brings up, is that why do we put up with the fact that public schools teach people for 12, 13 years, and yet they're still not even worth $15 an hour coming out of there? Like, why do we put up with that? Again, people should be worth 15. They probably should be worth 20 to 25, like I said. And again, it just makes no sense. Like, the entire society nowadays is run just completely backwards. And it's run because society is based off emotions, not reason, not logic, not any of that kind of stuff. And it should be, but the reality is that it isn't. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, I appreciate any donations. But the main thing that I would want is just follow me. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Subscribe on BitChute. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Parlay. Do all that stuff because that's what I really care about.